I don't know whether it's possible to cultivate a style.
Nobody is precisely what they think they are. Love is where you find it, where you find it, where you find it. Love is where you find it.
It may be in the last moments of my life, I will be curious to know what it means to die.
Welcome to Folk Phenomenology. My name is Sam Rocha. This is episode 9 of season 1, featuring special guest Ogechi Akalebere on powerlifting. Today's episode was originally recorded on April 1st, 2021. Folk Phenomenology is sponsored by Whip and Stock Publishers, who published my 2015 book, Folk Phenomenology, Education, Study, and the Human Person. Give Us This Day, Daily Prayer for Today's Catholic, the Institute for Christian Socialism, Building a Movement of the Ecumenical Christian Left, Solidarity Hall, Eden plus Utopia, Revelation Cable Company, Vancouver Custom Cables and Pedalboard Solutions, Where Peter Is, There Is the Church, the Juan Diego Network, Catholic Audio for Latinos, and Commonweal Magazine, the leading lay Catholic voice for commentary on religion, politics, and culture. The featured sponsor for today's episode is Black Catholic Messenger, an online publication for Black Catholics. This is a new publication that was started, or more precisely restarted, in the fall of last year, 2020. And the founders, or perhaps I should say refounders, Alessandra Harris and Nate Tinner Williams, are two voices that I have been following and gaining a great deal of education from regarding Black Catholicism and the Black Catholic Church. And I would encourage everyone to not only support the Black Catholic Messenger, but take the time to go to their About page, which I'll feature in the show notes, their history and vision statement. I think it's one of the more interesting, more historically rooted, and more compelling, really, statements of an organization of any kind that I've read in a long time. And I'm just really grateful to them for their support, and really encourage you to likewise support them in whatever way you can. Of all the organizations that I'm just so blessed to have on board for Folk Phenomenology, I believe they're the youngest one, and it really says a lot for them to show their support of this show in a period of time where they're just still really within the first year of launching their own publication. And so that kind of mutual aid, that kind of solidarity, that kind of generosity is something that I hope doesn't go unnoticed by all the listeners here in Folk Phenomenology. Please be sure to find their website, as I mentioned in the show notes, along with the websites of all our other wonderful sponsors here at Folk Phenomenology. If you would like to support Folk Phenomenology, please share this episode, subscribe to the show on your favorite app or platform, and maybe leave us a review or drop a tip. Also, maybe put in a rating. You can find Folk Phenomenology on social media as well. Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram all have dedicated accounts. And as repetitive as that line can be, it really is true. Every bit of volume boosting, every bit of sharing, every bit of interaction, especially on social media, really goes a long way. And I really thank all of you who are doing that, and would encourage everyone to do as much as they feel they can. Today's episode is about powerlifting. It's about the body. It's about sport. It's about a number of things that I think are neglected in some of the philosophical discussions we might have about the person or the world or faith or language or all these other things. And so I'm just so excited to share this episode with you as we continue on our journey, on our pilgrimage to delight in the world, to love the world, guided today by Ogechi Akalebere and her wonderful, amazing story, Dilexit Mundum. Today on Folk Phenomenology, I am joined with Ogechi Akalebere. Thank you so much, Ogechi, for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You are a person of many talents and many interests. Today, I would really love to have an extended conversation about your life as a powerlifter and about powerlifting in general, if that's okay with you.
That's totally fine. I love it.
Wonderful. Well, why don't you just start off with telling us a bit about your story and about your interests, and from the kind of, particulars of that story and stuff, I would at some point like to talk in some detail about powerlifting. I don't want to lead off with any, with too many at least, assumptions though. So I'll let you go first and talk to me a bit about, what powerlifting is to you and how you do it and what's going on there.
Okay, so a little bit about me. I am Nigerian American. I was born in Nigeria. My family, my mom and I, my dad came to New Jersey. My siblings were born in New Jersey, but we eventually settled on the East Coast in Maryland, and I've lived in Maryland most of my life. And growing up, the way to connect the best with my dad was through sports. So he would take us out on Saturdays to play soccer because he was a really, really good soccer player. His nickname is Bahama, which I guess had something to do with like being one with the grass or something that's like I don't know, like these legends that your parents tell you and you grow up and you're just like, is this true or is this like just like you're hyping yourself up? But he was really, really good at soccer, and my mom was really, really good at track and field, and coincidentally those are the two sports that I competed in high school. So growing up, my memories of sports were those Saturdays going to a local park, playing soccer and volleyball. And I think my dad had dreams of my sister and I being the next Venus and Serena, but my eye-hand coordination said otherwise.
Okay.
So I just stuck with soccer and track and field. So I've always been really athletic from a young age. I even was like very muscular since I remember having muscles since the 5th grade, and I never really had shame in them because for me, I was just like, these are just genetically how both my parents are athletes, those African genetics or whatever. That's just how it came out. It wasn't until I think middle school and high school where you get teased for how you look and things like that I kind of felt that first bit of shame. But I kind of leaned into it. So you had the option of taking an elective gym class in my high school years, and so I took Introduction to Strength Training. I was one of maybe 2 or 3 girls, and then I took Advanced Strength Training, where I was the only girl in the class, and I loved it. I liked that those muscles that people kind of teased me for were a symbol of strength, and I could just lift weights. I didn't have to be skinny or be known for the different features that people poke out when you grow up. I just could lift the weights. And I kind of didn't think anything of it as a sport. I just thought that was like a means to work out. And then I went on to college where I was extremely lazy. I didn't really lift weights or do anything. I had the opportunity to go to a school and compete in track and field, but I chose a different school because I wanted to focus more on athletics, and I kind of wish I at least tried to walk on in their track team. I went to the University of Pittsburgh, and it's well known for their science. I was actually pre-med. Spoiler alert, I am not a doctor, so you can tell how that went.
You said athletics, but I think you meant academics earlier, right? You went to Pittsburgh to focus on academics?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
But Pittsburgh does have a great track and field team, and I could have chosen to go and join the club team or try out for their actual D1 team, but I chose to just focus on being pre-med, which is already hard as it is, and I was at the time majoring in Spanish, so kind of 2 different degrees, and so it needed my focus. But
humanities and science combo.
But what happened was I neglected my physical health, and what I've learned in hindsight is that there's kind of a triangle of what makes me the most useful and productive version of myself. And if I neglect any of those, my spiritual, mental, or physical health, I kind of fall apart. Like it just is how it is. So part of me falling apart was that neglect of my physical health. So I kind of did what I knew was like normal for me, and I would go to the gym and lift weights. I would do some cardio because it's like necessary, I guess, but I still hate I hate cardio so much.
Yeah.
And I gravitated towards lifting weights, especially things for my legs because that's my strongest muscle. And I really liked it. But again, I kind of fell into the trap of having negative body issues, wanting to fit a mold that wasn't meant for me. And I remember one of my guy friends, he was like, I don't know if I can curse on this one.
No, you're good. No, this is definitely, this is not for family friendly show. Go ahead.
He said, damn, Ogechi, what happened to your ass? And I said, wait, what? And he was just like, you've gotten really skinny. And I was proud of that. I like basically starved myself, and I just did cardio, which is not me at all. And I was like, I've lost all this weight, but I had like no muscle mass. And he was like, you're known to, like, of all the girls that I know, you're known to have like muscle and your thick thighs and all of those things that make you Ogechi. There's nothing wrong with that. You can still like be healthy and keep that. And I think, and he wasn't saying it from like a lusting point of view. He was saying it like, this is what makes you special. Your physique is what makes you strong and makes it you able to do all these different things. And so it was funny that it came from a guy. And that mind shift really got me going back to just lifting weights and doing what I wanted to do to feel healthy and less to look like a certain type of look. After college, I went back to just, work, and I was focusing on work. And again, I really wanted to focus on my physical health because I needed that balance. So my first physical gym membership that I did after college was a kickboxing class.
Okay.
I was disappointed because I thought we were going to be kicking people and not just the air. So I was like, there's no contact, what is happening here? But it was great. It got my heart going, and it was a form of cardio that didn't really annoy me like running on the treadmill or the elliptical did. I did step aerobics. I really liked that. Anything that could like get me moving, especially if there was music involved. Not a huge fan of Zumba, mostly because I think I just can't focus on the moves and the people and all of that together.
Sure.
But my brother was like, what are you doing? You're paying all this, like, because those specialty gyms cost a lot of money. So he's like, just get a gym membership. It's the same price of like 2 weeks of those classes. So I got a gym membership, and if I could like track my routine, I would walk through the doors. There's like the side to the right of that particular gym was all the cardio equipment. It was like the plague. I would like avoid that section, go straight to the weights and do my leg extensions and all of those things. And I was really just going through the motions. I tried to spice things up with their group classes, but I wasn't feeling motivated. And I think my brother was like, you need to try something else. So at the time, he's my younger brother. He was doing bodybuilding, and my coach, who also happened to be an assistant coach for my old high school, noticed how strong my brother was. Like, he's like, you have freak genetics. Like, dude, you have to be doing powerlifting also. And my brother's like, no, because at that time, bodybuilding was like, that's the sexy sport to do. Powerlifting, who talked about powerlifting? So my coach is like, okay, you do a bodybuilding competition, I'll train you, but you have to promise me you'll do a powerlifting competition. And so he did. Powerlifting competition was really good. I probably would never admit this to my brother in real life, but he is like freakishly strong and athletic. And so he fell in love with doing both. And when I was like, I don't know, I might spice things up and do CrossFit or something, my brother was like, do you know what CrossFit is? And I'm like, they had a CrossFit team at Pitt, and the one thing I don't like is they run a lot, but they lift weights, and I like to lift weights. And he's just like, "You hate cardio. Why would you do CrossFit? Try out powerlifting." And I was like, "I don't know what this powerlifting is that you're talking about." And he was like, "It's all the stuff that you do at the gym, but in the competition, and they compete." And I was like, "Okay, well, sure." So I met up with my coach, and I was like, "I'm here because my brother told me to do this." And he's like, "Well, I need to make sure that you're committed." So for the first 6 months, I just like trained with him. I had to do obviously cardio stuff to build up my endurance. I think really he was kind of making sure that I was serious about it. I had to dedicate time. And I talk a lot about how that beginning part of powerlifting reminded me about the spiritual plateaus. Like, you get really no fruits out of it, but you have to do it in order to get to the next phase. Like, the science nerd in me thinks about those phases of gas and water, and there's those plateau parts, but it's necessary to get to the next phase of water or gas. And so that was like my plateau part of powerlifting, just going and being committed to myself, to my coach. And then finally he was like, "Okay, you're ready to start learning the basics of powerlifting." And anyone listening that doesn't know what powerlifting is, the 3 lifts in powerlifting are squat, bench press, and deadlift. And that's how it goes in the competition. So you start off with squatting, you put the barbell on your back, whatever weight you choose. You get 3 attempts to get as high as you can in that lift. Same thing with bench press, and then deadlift. The weight is on the ground, you lift it up, and you get 3 attempts for bench press and deadlift. So that is how a competition goes, and that's kind of how he structured training me. So I first learned how to do a proper squat, and then I learned your body mechanics for me and what works best for my body type at the time to squat. So some people squat very narrow depending on how their hips are and their leg strength. I squat a little bit wide, and now my squat position has changed as my body has changed, as my technique has changed. But he focused a lot on technique and routine, and same thing with bench press and deadlift. And it was frustrating because I was like, "Well, when are we gonna do like the big weights? Like, throw on the weights. Like, I want to be fancy." But a lot of
some plates.
Yeah, like, let's throw it on. Like, let's max out every practice. But what I had to learn was discipline involves enjoying the process and going through the process. So sometimes when I see people at the gym, they PR every time they're at the gym, which congratulations, but true technique and growth comes from gradually building up the weight, making sure that as you increase weight, your technique remains intact, your body memorizes proper technique. And I thankfully have never had a powerlifting related injury. I do have a knee injury now, but that's related to falling down the steps.
Okay.
Everybody thinks it came from the gym, but it's because I'm a klutz, literally.
Okay.
So I really attribute not having any gym related injuries to that focus on technique and doing everything in the right time. So I did my first competition 6 months after I started. So I started in January, just after my birthday. And that was almost like a resolution for myself. A lot of things happened that year. I finally got my license. I got my license, guys, at 25. So that's
okay.
That was like a thing for me. That year was a year of independence. So many things happened.
And what year is this?
Oh goodness, you're gonna make me do math. So I'm 30. I'm 33 now, and I started when I was 25. So whatever that.
So about 8 years ago. Yeah. Good.
So 8 years ago, that was like my quarter life crisis, and everybody's like, you see people that have their life together. They either are like still in grad school or going to grad school, or they're starting their first real job. And I kind of felt like I was like floating. I was working. I had just gotten out of a terrible job, and then I was working at part-time for the county and trying to inch my way up through the county's county government jobs that I had. And so I really didn't think that I was like successful. And so I was like, well, let me do something for just me. And powerlifting was it came at a time where I really, really, really needed that. And I think God really knew that I needed that. And so I didn't have a car, even though I had gotten my license. So I had to take 2 buses to go to the gym every single day, go to the gym in the morning, train with my coach. And then since my job was a half-day job, change at the gym and then go to work. Take 2 buses to work. And I did it for months until I finally got a full-time job. But I still, after work, take 2 buses, went to the gym, and I could be dead tired after work. But I knew that was my time, and I didn't want to let myself down or my coach down. And I think that taught my coach a lot, but it taught me a lot that I really can do anything if I put my faith into it and my mind to it. And kind of these notions of like lack of confidence that told me that I could only go so far was self-imposed and, imposed by the world. So I did my first competition and I crushed it.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, there wasn't that much competition because at the time there weren't many women competing. But compared to other women at that time, I was doing pretty good for a beginner. And so I caught that bug. And my coach was like, "Here we go." He was like, "When is the next one?" And so I did my next one after that in the fall. And this federation was a great beginner federation. They weren't super nitpicky about rules and things like that. I had to travel up to York, Pennsylvania to compete because at the time that federation only really had competitions in Pennsylvania and that area, which was a very interesting experience because York, Pennsylvania isn't the most diverse city in Pennsylvania, not gonna lie. So I definitely had some moments in competing where I was literally the only person of color in the room, or me and another judge. One moment that I'll never forget, it was a lady judge, and I did like a really good number. I can't even tell you what the lift was. I think it was squat because that's always been my best lift. And she's like teary-eyed coming up to me. She's like, "You don't know how amazing it is to see another Black woman at these competitions." And I didn't think anything of it then until someone else kind of said something similar to me about their daughter seeing a woman like me at a competition and feeling like they could do the sport. So I still carry that with me, and I think that applies to anything that you do. You never realize what your representation as whoever you are means to someone else. But I really never looked around the room and was like, how many Black, like I was just lucky if there's another woman at that time. It was cool because most of the time I competed with my brother. So he was with me at the competitions, or if he wasn't competing, he was there cheering me on. And I really trusted my coach. For me, competing started off as just an expression of showing myself that I could do something that I really never thought I could do, and showing others like this is a little bit of a testimony. My first competition I had, I didn't have a proper powerlifting singlet because again, the ones that they had that were unisex or were men's were so ugly, and I like style. Like style is important to me. I don't care. You can ask my coach. I used to put on my makeup before a competition. I had to have my lipstick going because it's just kind of like part of my uniform. And he was like, "You need to have a singlet. That's the rule." So I took an old track and field singlet that I bought off of eBay, like maybe $10, and I had old sneakers. Like I didn't have that much money to pour into the sport that I was trying out, so I tried to spend as little money as possible. Old soccer socks for my deadlift socks because you're required to have long socks when you deadlift. And he wrote on the back with the chalk that you use so your hands aren't sweaty, a cross. And I didn't know it until like he did it, and he was like, "I put a cross in your back." And I was like, "Why?" He was like, "Because for you, this is about like showing up for God and showing up for yourself, and that testimony that you're trying to make on the platform. And that has become my like signature, if you will. Coach is always,
Nice.
almost every meet, he's
Nice.
put that there. And to be honest, powerlifting was mostly in the beginning about proving something to myself, and now it's grown into a form of prayer, a form of like testimony. And I could talk about the lessons that I've learned in powerlifting in the 8 years that I've done it. It's great that I started with my brother, and now I've had teammates that were also women, from different backgrounds, different weight classes. I've competed in many weight classes, which could be a good or a bad thing, depending on how you slice it. But I think the most important thing in competing in different weight classes is that however your body looks or is, there's strength in it, obviously, because I'm competing in that weight class. And I have done great in almost all the weight classes that I've competed in. And so that just showed me that rather than trying to fit or stay at a certain stage, there was a time where I used to compete in 165, and then the federation changed the way that they did their weight class structure to fit the European model. So now I had to compete in 158. And let me tell you, 165 to 158 seems like a small drop, but depending on how your muscles work and just how your physique is, it's not water weight. Yeah, it was like not easy. And the lowest I got was 158.9, and I needed to be 158.1 or 2 or something. Oh man. And I was like, you know what, this is it. I'm done. I'm just gonna go up a weight class. And I competed in that weight class, and there was and to be honest, when I went up a weight class, that was probably the strongest that I've ever been. And so if I stuck to that, like, I need to be in the smaller person's weight class, I wouldn't have like I would never have hit the numbers that I've hit in squatting and deadlifting. And that meant changing up how I practice, my technique, and how I position myself. But I think being able to be flexible in your training is important. As you age, things hurt. You have to be flexible with your expectations for yourself as well. So there's just so many lessons that I've learned in powerlifting, but I think the best one is flexibility. And then second to that would be finding a community. It is a very individual sport because you're literally just you and the weights on the platform or in the gym. And you're not just squatting, benching, and deadlifting. You're doing all of the other things to help that lift. And you have to do it. No one is going to lift it for you. And if you don't perform well in a training cycle, then you can pretty much pinpoint the mistakes you made or the things you slacked off on. So it's very individual in that sense. But I've loved the moments of community with my teammates, rallying, yelling at me as I'm like struggling with the weight, especially deadlift. Deadlift is the best moment in a powerlifting competition because it's the last lift and it's literally everything on the platform. And you're lifting that weight up and you hear everybody cheering you on. And my coach always yells hips to like bring your hips through as you're lifting for a deadlift. And sometimes there are times if it was just me, I would have dropped the weight. But like having everyone encourage me, it's like a shot of adrenaline that it can't even be. It's almost if anyone's a runner, if you see your family at the finish line of a marathon or something, you want to sprint to the finish, like we were discussing earlier. It's like that sprint to the finish feeling. I didn't mention that I did do CrossFit or cross country one season. Wow.
Talk about not liking cardio.
Yeah, there's a funny story there. So sometimes I have not the brightest moments, but I thought cross country had something to do with skiing. Don't ask me why in Maryland we would have a skiing team. But I was like, cross country skiing? Okay, I'll sign up. And I show up and I'm just like, wait a minute, why is there a cross country season in the summer? I just oblivious. And so my coach was like, no, you want to do track and field, right? Like cross country will help you build up that endurance for track and field. When I tell you I was the last person at every race on the team, every single race, but I still showed up. I hated it for every single day, but I was like, I am not a quitter. I showed up. I did those wretched 3.5 mile or 3 mile races in the trails, the track, the neighborhoods. And I came in last for the team every single race, but I always sprinted to the finish. I always sprinted to the finish. Like my legs could be the tree trunks, but I always sprinted to the finish because I like finishing strong. And I guess they noticed it because I got what was called the Cougar Award for it. Basically, kind of like not a sportsmanship award, but kind of like a
spirit award.
Yeah, like that person on a team that really inspired people. Because for sure, most people would have quit. Like, this is terrible. And cross country went into like the colder months, into November. So it was cold, and but it really did help me in my track season. I didn't do it again. I instead opted for soccer the next year. But it was, again, another time where I kind of challenged myself, knew that I was not going to be the best, but it wasn't about being the best. It was about proving that I could do something that I thought that I couldn't do. Like, if there's ever something that, I could never, then I have to try it, because that should never be something that is a common statement for you. And I think I've tackled that in a lot of areas. I never thought I could be a personal trainer because I didn't look like the typical personal trainer. I'm plus size, so that usually isn't what you see on TV or at gyms. But I knew that someone else that's plus size probably would gravitate towards me being their personal trainer or a boot camp instructor. So I work part-time. Well, previous to my injury, I worked part-time at a gym being a boot camp instructor and a personal trainer. And I've liked it. And it was an opportunity to prove to myself that I actually can do something. And that required like early morning, 5:30 wake up, 5 o'clock wake ups, training people and observing classes and putting in the hours to know how they teach those particular classes, extra hours studying for the personal training test, and things that I thought like, I don't have the time, or I could never. And it was really great. I cried when I passed the program and I passed the test, because those early hours really were like a sacrifice, and it reminded me of those two bus trips to the gym in the morning, training with my coach, and then going to work after, or those late nights at the gym, coming home, taking the bus until 11, and then waking up early to go to work the next day. And I think that anything that you do that stretches you physically and mentally and spiritually, there's so many graces that can come from that. And I'm sure there are things that I've learned that I don't even realize about myself in powerlifting, but I definitely learned that there's very few things that are impossible to do if you put forth the effort and you ask God to help you along the way. I don't think at all that I did any of those things by my own will. There's definitely some help. I mean, my guardian angel was waking up at 5 a.m. with me. So, I mean, I wasn't alone, but I think sometimes we tend to limit ourselves, especially I think sometimes even women limit ourselves because of lack of representation. But it does take a lot of bravery to be one of those few or first in doing things. But I've learned to like thrive off of that, because even if you don't see it, there's someone else doing it. There's definitely other people powerlifting, but way before me, and in other parts of the country. And just because I didn't see them in my competitions doesn't mean they didn't exist. And now powerlifting has grown so much. There's so many different female weight classes, female divisions, and I mean, there's even meets that are women only because there's not many women interested. And now singlets, thank God, have evolved to not be so ugly.
So now, that's so good. So one of the things, I mean, this is an amazing, amazing journey.
Yes.
And I'd love to talk a bit about the some of the finer points of lifting, because there's two aspects of a lift, and I'm here thinking in particular about like the squat rack that I think a lot of people may not know or understand kind of at a kind of slightly more detailed manner, and that's the absolute necessity of a really strong degree of not just, you talked about flexibility in terms of being able to move between weight classes, but actual physical flexibility,
yes.
like the ability to have fast. I just said my next thing, like hip flexibility. But then the other thing is that actually a powerlifter requires quickness.
Yes.
Like you have to be able to respond and get quick. And sometimes the interval between getting stuck on a lift and getting through it is so small. And I know you can maybe get some encouragement from the outside that kind of mystically lifts you up, but a lot of times it's just on you and your body, right?
Yeah.
So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the need for physical flexibility, because when people hear powerlifting, they think strength, brute strength, and they don't realize that you can be jacked and not be flexible, and you won't be able to go to generate power. In some sense, your physique can actually get in the way by not being flexible. And in the same way, if you're not quick, if you're slow, if you're slow on your lift, you're not going to be able to get in front of your weight enough, and you'll be able to get more weight up than the guy who's just, or girl, sorry, who is, gigantic and massive and stuff. So I wonder if you could, I obviously am speaking from a certain smaller degree of experience, but the squat rack was my thing too. So, when I played rugby, my backs, I used to tell them that they needed to go dance more, because their hips were tight.
Yes.
And they couldn't, they were all peanut butter and no jelly. They just could not get themselves, sideways and forward and backwards and in and out of a ruck and stuff. And they thought I was crazy telling them that. And a lot of times I had people who were fast. They could get from point A to point B in a straight line, like on track and field, but they weren't quick. They had no shake, they had no ability.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. They had no like feel, like kind of like a little bit of like just like a little tick, And because of that, they were less athletic on the pitch. But I would often, whenever we would be in off-season strength training, tell them like quickness and flexibility and movement and the ability to dance and not be, all peanut butter and no jelly. That's the squat rack. That's the bench. That's all those things. So I wonder, these are me. I coached for just 2 years in rugby, but I played American football and then rugby, which are very physical, and you have to be in the gym and you have to know free weights. I wonder if you could talk about these things, because when a lot of people hear powerlifting, they hear, pushing up weight, yelling all the time and stuff. And they don't think about the poetry and the flexibility and the magic of quickness in lifting. And I wonder if, first of all, you could tell me if I'm full of it. Maybe I'm wrong. Or second of all, if I'm to the degree that I'm right, I would love to hear you expound on those qualities a bit more.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of physics that's involved in powerlifting and really in strength sports in general. But if we look at the formula for power, it's force times speed. So you have to, like, you're right, you have to have speed involved.
Acceleration.
So what my coach always says, and how I picture it, is, especially with the squat, I'm loading the weight up and I want to be able to then spring up with that weight, with that same weight, as fast as possible. Some other sports, they want to hold on to that tension slowly. So for example, you might see bodybuilders, they do like a 4 count or a 5 count as they're lifting. Powerlifting, as soon as that bench touches my chest, I want it up. But someone that wants to build up hypertrophy and really like load in their muscles, they might slow down that movement because they're going for aesthetics rather than power and that speed and driving as much force as fast as possible up or down or lifting it as quickly as possible. And so in squat particularly, there's a lot of different things and ways that you can adjust your body and your technique to be able to be as fast as possible while holding and loading a lot of weight. So like I said, in the different weight classes that I had, you know, like I had my belly. If my belly was a little bit bigger, then that means I had to like make room for that as I went down. I didn't want to, you know, not be able to breathe at the bottom. You want to be able to hold your ab and your cores in tight and then fire those glutes as you come up, fire those calves, those hamstrings, everything. But if I then went to more of a sumo, which is a wider stance, the wider my stance is, the stronger the muscles that will lift me up have to be. So whereas I could have been more quad dominant, and you see some people with a narrow stance, and they could have, they usually come from an Olympic lifting background, which is a different, it's not as power, which is force time. It's a different formula with Olympic lifting. There's a lot of explosiveness that's necessary, but they train differently, and so they tend to be more quad dominant as they come down with the weight because of where the weight is up out in front of them with the snatch or the clean and jerk. But because our weight is at the back, you're thinking of those physics. And then if I widen my stance, I need to make sure that my hamstrings are stronger. Where before I could have relied a lot on my quads. Now when I train, I'm making sure my hamstrings are strong, building up those muscles, because I will rely on them now with my wider squat stance. Some people change the position of the bar on their back. I always will be a high bar squatter. But that's...
Explain to folks who might not understand, because I just realized we didn't distinguish front squats from back squats. Obviously, powerlifting is traditional back squats. There is a front squat, which is, of course, going to put the emphasis on your quads even more in that stance. But maybe explain to them, though, what a high bar squatter means.
So a high bar squatter, which I like to call the old school squatting. I'm very old school in my powerlifting.
Nice.
But high bar squatting means that the bar is just on your trap muscles, which are those muscles in between your neck and your shoulders. And so they're just cushioned there. I am lucky that I have without even trying strong, I can carry a load of groceries and my traps are like, hey guys, I'm ready to party. So those are muscles that are always activated for whatever reason. But I have pretty dominant trap muscles. So it's a nice cushion to put the bar on. Some people, because of how they hinge down into a squat, find it beneficial to lower it a little bit below their trap. But that means that you have to really have strong back muscles to hold that weight there and really grip the weight and not tip over. I don't have that, and I personally, and I'm not an expert, so don't at me, but I personally have seen more injuries from low bar squats than high bar squats. But you will have quicker gains with low bar squats because...
Well, even in terms of safety, I mean, the thing for me about a low bar position, even in just like a workout mode, is your hands have to be super engaged.
So you need that flexibility with your shoulders.
You need that. I've always liked a bar where I can almost like bounce it with my hands almost just underneath, and it just all stays right there, so that whenever I come up, I mean, my hands are almost catching it as it comes back down. Because at the top of a workout, when I'm not and I know I don't PR in the gym every day, at the top of a workout, if I hit it really fast, I'll actually have issues where the bar will jump on me a bit.
So I could talk about that.
Okay, maybe you can help me out with my form.
You should not be, if you're able to bounce it, it's actually not the best technique. Everything should be tight. So your back should be tight. You want to anchor that bar. because anything that's not tight, you're wasting energy on something else where you could be focusing and concentrating it on down and up. That's the only thing that should be moving.
So I'm wasting some output there?
Yes. So everything should be stiff and tight. So if you are loading yourself, if you're at a squat rack and you're doing a back squat, which we're talking about, you go up to the bar and you position your shoulders where you position it behind your back where you want it to be, and then you put your hands on the barbell, and then I like to have there's a slight discomfort, so I peacock my chest, which just means that you're like squeezing your shoulder blades back, that obviously lifts up your chest, and then you want to keep those shoulder blades squeezed as you lift the bar up off the rack, and then you keep your core tight as you walk back, so you don't hit the rack as you squat down. Some competitions, they have what's called a monolift, so there's a machine that just unracks itself, so you just stay there, which is ideal because then you're not wasting any energy. All you have to do is go down and up. But most competitions, you walk out just a couple steps, as few steps as possible. The best sign of a beginner or someone that maybe hasn't gotten that technique down is they are walking like 4 or 5. They're like walking. Their legs are moving too much. Now you're wasting all this energy, and you kind of have to reposition your back, your shoulders, and get everything tight and ready. And then you load up that spring. So that spring starts from those traps, the back, creating a little bit of a slight arch, at least with the high bar, so that everything is tight. If you could see me, you would see like a slight arch in my back, just because I'm loading and squeezing. What I also add is this.
Are you eyes up or eyes forward? I've heard two different.
Listen, I can't even tell you what's happening because I feel like I black out for like the 10 seconds. I just can't see anything. Like nothing exists. Okay. But I think I'm usually eyes forward because I want to look at the judge. But then once I start lifting, it's like nothing's happening. I'm like in this la la land.
Blackout.
Yeah. But I load up the weight. I keep my core tight. I get my air. Once I have that air, I hold it in, and I squat down, drive with my heels and up. And you want to make sure your knees are not caving in. And because first of all, if your knees are caving in, your hamstrings aren't firing as they need to. Those glutes aren't firing, and you run the risk of dropping the weight. So knees out as you come up, heels down, drive up, stand stiff, and then just walk the same way you walked out slowly in. You walk out slowly out. It's the same way you walk out slowly back in and rack. Some people will be like, oh, I'm done, and they kind of are loose coming back in. Again, you run the risk, especially if it's a PR, of injuring yourself, maybe twinging your back. If you keep everything tight, it's almost like a protected package, and you're reloading that package back onto the rack. So
I think you're right. I think there's an element of vanity in this, for me at least, because well, no, I'm just saying, like, for me, I love the sound aesthetically of the plates rattling.
Oh gosh,
there's that shake at the top. I'll even, when I put my little pincers on, leave a little space so I can just like a rattle, and I just like to hear it at the top. I wish everyone could see on the video. But Ogechi is like totally judging.
That makes me cringe. No, my brother does that sometimes. He loves that sound of it. See, his issue in some competitions is that his traps are so big that when he like walks back, it kind of bounces. And so some judges,
I'm not jacked like that. Yeah.
Some judges might be picky. I always practice the same way I would compete. And I've done that like since high school. And that's something that was drilled into me forever, and especially my coach. And so if I didn't do it in the gym, I'm not going to start doing it at a competition. And if I learn that I have to do it in a competition, I'm going to do it at the gym. So like some judges are really picky about those that start. And if anything is shaking, they're going to take their sweet time before they let you start that squat. And the problem with that is the problem with that is now you're holding like, I don't know, 300 pounds, 200 pounds, whatever the weight is, on your back, and you haven't started your lift, and you're trying to brace yourself, and time is ticking. And what did we say?
Yeah.
The time you want to be able to move that weight as quickly as possible. So
Sure.
obviously,
I can see in a competitive environment.
Yeah, the natural person is not caring about a competition, but
no, that's true. I mean, one thing though, because I think people who may not, there's going to be a lot of listeners who powerlifting is a little bit out of left field, and a squat rack is not. One thing that people don't realize the difference between a PR lift and, for instance, I did one powerlifting meet whenever I was in high school, just because all my friends were doing it. We were all in the gym together in off season, so I went, and I remember like wearing a proper singlet, putting on a proper belt and proper knee wraps. My coach was like, Rocha, you should start at 4. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, I'm going to embarrass myself. I should really start like about 375 and kind of go from there. I want to feel good. He's like, no, 4 is going to be light for you. And I was like, there's no way 4 is going to be light for me. My first set is like 280. And I went and I just exploded through that 4 because of the knee wraps, the singlet, the belt, and all that. And what I'm trying to get at though is that whenever you have serious weight, like safety cautious weight, when you have spotters all around you, this is not a joke. The moment bar and body makes contact, I'm not talking anymore about me working out. Like there's something of I almost feel like there's almost an awe and a wonder to it. And the ability to just come down and not hurt yourself. Like there's so many things, and I'm probably here speaking out of the fact that I'm a bit intimidated even by weight that I can lift. And for you, it's probably you've broken through that many times.
You have to respect the weight because it can hurt you.
Because it's kind of scary, isn't it? Like, am I wrong here? Like,
no.
And so the thing to me is like, I have many times, including when I worked out and kind of farting around in the weight room. I can get it off the rack. I can move down slowly, and then I got to get out. Because I have no business trying to hit that much weight, and I'm not gonna do it. And I need to know. I need to know to get underneath it safely with some humility, and get out of that lift safely and keep my spotters safe and everything like that. Can you talk about like how to fail at your lift in a good way, in a beautiful way, in an honorable way?
Yes. Okay. So, some days you're gonna go to the gym and maybe you slept weird, your shoulders are not feeling it, and I failed. I can't even count how many times at the gym, and that is the place to fail. You rather fail at the gym, tweak your lift, or know that maybe this is it. Maybe you attempted a PR, or you have a certain amount of reps to do, and that last rep is just not happening. And then you take a break and you try the next set, and you might crush it the next set. You have to be humble. I think the difference between injury and not can sometimes be pride, especially with people that may have had a lot of success in the gym and then all of a sudden it's not happening. So to fail properly in a squat, technically, you want to make sure that the weight falls behind you. And this is if you're doing it by yourself. And I want to emphasize that this is a traditional squat rack. This is not a Smith machine, which is not at all the same. The Smith machine actually has almost like a fail-safe built in anyway. So it will just fall down. You won't hurt yourself because you won't be like, the weight won't fall over your head or your neck. So you always want to make sure the weight falls behind you. I have done this the wrong way. Thanks to some poor hydration and heavy cramping. I've cramped during a meet and fallen forward.
Oh my gosh.
And the danger of that is that if there's someone in front of you, especially at a meet, you can hurt them. You can, depending on the type of rack, a lot of times in competitions they use these small racks, so it's literally just two poles holding on to that hold up the weight, and not a power rack. So that means that it could drop that and hurt someone. You could hurt the spotters. So you want to fall back, and that gives the spotters the opportunity to move out of the way. If you don't have spotters, it means that you don't hurt your neck or your back. And I think that's the best way to practice.
I mean, this is weight that can kill someone.
This is weight that can knock,
I don't know if our listeners know. Yeah, like this is could be like, you know, if someone's foot is there, like it's bye.
Yes. And so with bench press, it gets a little bit trickier because it depends on where you fail, right? If you lift off and you can't lift it off yourself, then you probably should, like, you know, ask for a lift off, and make sure that person has their hands underneath the bar as you come down.
So they let go.
And so if for whatever reason you're like, I can't bring it back up, they can help guide the weight up off of your chest so you don't crush your chest. You should always have your thumbs on the bar. I know the sexy thing to do is like that 4-finger bench. And
now you're getting after me on my bench. I didn't ask for this.
Listen, do what you need to do, but I have seen someone crush their face with a barbell benching. To be fair, they were lifting like crazy weight, and they had what's called a bench shirt, so it allows you to even lift even more weight. But they were doing that hook grip on a bench, and that thumb is there to kind of like be an extra digit to hold on to the bar. So if it slips, you can snap your wrist. It falls on your face, and it was blood everywhere. The most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Out of me. Right. So please, again, this isn't even if you're...
I have to put a content warning here.
This isn't even if you're competing, but I feel like the caliber for competitions also can keep you safe as a casual lifter. And so some people don't want to arch when they bench because they think it's cheating, but you're really, I mean, this is a whole nother, I can talk about how that's not cheating, and I've given seminars on this, but
I'm glad to hear that because I throw up a lot more weight on the bench whenever I can have my bottom engaged.
Yes, because to be honest, when I bench with my every single lift is a lift that involves your whole body. And yes, there are muscles that are more involved than not, but every single lift to me involves my legs. I drive with my legs when I bench, and that involves that slight arch, activating those glutes, and then driving with my heels as I use my chest muscles. And that is an advantage that I have, because if I was just to do a flat bench and just use my chest, the way that my chest is set up, it's just not possible to lift as much weight as I would like. And it also means that you are less likely to injure your shoulders, which is the weakest joint that we have. And so I'd rather not look as fancy or whatever, as sexy as I lift, and keep that shoulder joint together and not tear anything in my pec or my shoulders, than to have, you know, a super flat bench. And then what happens is, if you are kind of like failing in the lift, what tries to compensate is that shoulder. And after time, continuing to do that will start to hurt your shoulder. And I was going down that path because I was like, I want to bench press is to this day my least favorite. Not because I've devoted a lot of time and energy to the bench press, but it's just the slowest grower for me. Now with my leg injury, it's like I'm like crushing it. I'm crushing
Are you? That's awesome. That's so great to hear.
All I have. But bench press has always been really hard, and I've done all the auxiliary lifts and accessory lifts, but for women it's often the hardest lift. And so those that like physics of it all, and it goes back to physics. If you think of the mechanics of that lift, the flat doesn't provide a strong foundation to activate the chest and really push the weight. You're really activating your shoulders sometimes when you lift. And then if you are struggling with the lift, what you're aggravating is that shoulder and not necessarily. So if I'm struggling with the lift, I can activate those leg muscles to help drive me through. And if after all of that, I can't do it, I am very vocal. I say, help. And usually I have someone helping me lift off. If you're by yourself, the best thing to do, if you can, is to tilt the weight one side and then move from underneath the weight.
Get out. Yeah.
Don't let it stay on your chest.
I think it's so important because, sports culture can sometimes, I think, be a bit triumphalistic about, you can do anything, those kinds of things. And I think that's super important. Like, there's something about sports culture that to me is about transcendence, and that like you realize you can transcend the limits, the ordinary everyday limits that you encounter physically, in a lot of cases, if you're physically abled and all these other things, right?
Yes.
But then what I feel like gets lost, and I know like as I've grown and aged, I've been forced by time to admit, is the profound humility that sports culture teaches, where it teaches you how to lose, it teaches you how to fail, it teaches you how to value perhaps maybe technique, flexibility, pliability, quickness. I'm teaching my sons how to lift free weights right now, and I'd love to close our time with maybe running my pedagogical approach by you and seeing if I can mine your experience here. So I bought a broomstick, like a big long broomstick, wooden broomstick, and I'm teaching them everything, bar technique, posture, and we're just going to learn how to bench and squat with this broomstick with zero weight involved, and just controlling yourself with your core and your body posture, and then lifting for a while just at home with our broomstick, which is safe, but I'll simulate what spotting is, and I'll simulate these things so that then we can go and grab a 45-pound bar and they can work their way from that all the way up. Because I do find that, especially one of my kids is 14, the other one's 12. The 12-year-old, by the way, is a little stronger than the 14-year-old. Yeah, I know. And the 14-year-old has long arms, so like I think like there's going to be a really interesting.
He's going to be a good deadlifter.
Yeah, but whenever he gets even 45 pounds, right, on top of him for the first time and stuff, I want that to be safe and I want it to be positive and stuff. So that's how we're kind of going into it. What would you tell me here in closing about how to teach my children how to lift technically, and then also maybe some of these things about asking for help, learning how to fail, how to fall, some of those notes?
So I think that's a great way to learn, especially squat, and knowing how their body moves, and it can help you gauge like where their foot position should be. They're each going to be different or have different strengths. In that, I would challenge you to add some weight. I don't think 12 or 14 is too young to start. Usually the rule of thumb is the age at which they can take direction well and focus. So for some people that may be like 18 if they really can't listen to you.
47.
Yes, but usually I've seen kids compete as young as, I think the youngest in our federation is 13 to compete, but they've started at like 10 or 11. But that means that they have adult supervision and they're able to follow directions. Why I say add some weight is because what you've taught them is going to hit differently once there's actual resistance that they have to fight. And that could be something as simple as like really small dumbbells, or weighted, like just something weighted overhand. I love overhead squats because it helps them learn that flexibility. They have to drive from the heels. You really can't do overhead squats and be like loosey goosey or quad dominant. You can't. So that kind of placement of the weight above head forces that drive from underneath. So adding some of that where there's a little bit of a resistance and they have to remember, because now they have muscle memory under stress. So muscle memory under no stress is great, but what really helps is muscle memory under some stress. And then you can, like, you know, if that 12-year-old is better than a 14-year-old, then that there's a lesson there, and like that's gonna happen. You're gonna be competing, or maybe at the gym, and someone that's younger than you or older than you is doing something better. That's not for you to compete with them or your brother. It's for them to compete with yourself. So maybe this month he can only do, I don't know, a 10-pound weight overhead, and then in a year he could do 30. Well, he's progressed 20 pounds. That is success for him. And that translates into everything, whether it's schoolwork or life or whatever. And I think that's a great lesson that you're teaching your kids, how to behave under physical distress, you know, and that translates how to behave in just like the normal stress of life. I did want to add, I talked a lot about competing, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that as a powerlifter, the greatest thing that as a personal trainer, the best thing that I've learned is the ability to make sure that anyone, whether they're older, younger, coming from an injury or not, has the opportunity to exercise and feel comfortable. Especially at the gym that I train at, they emphasize modifications a lot, and there's humility in that, because maybe you were able to do like jump squats for like 20 jump squats or for 30 seconds, but now you have to slow it down and just do body weight squats with the weight. That's a modification, but you're still squatting. It's just not going to be explosive squats or high impact versus low impact. So if you are someone that wants to get back in the gym and you think that you might have to do what you used to do, you might look into modifications. For example, one modification for the barbell squat is a box squat. You can set the height as high or low as you feel comfortable, but that box behind you makes you feel more stable and comfortable, and you're still getting a good exercise and workout in, and maybe that's how you learn the technique, and then you can graduate towards a regular squat. So I just wanted to add that, because that's something that can help people graduate into a more advanced lift.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Folk Phenomenology Season 1, and special thanks to Ogechi Akalebere. I would like to again thank my sponsors. Whip and Stock Publishers gave us this day, the Institute for Christian Socialism, Solidarity Hall, Revelation Cable Company, Where Peter Is, the Juan Diego Network, and Commonweal Magazine, and of course our featured sponsor, Black Catholic Messenger. The friends of the show are the Commonweal Podcast, the Gloria Purvis Show, Disinherited Podcast, Davud Gozli, Up Too Late with Teresa Zoe Williams, Conversation on Tap, Saintly Witnesses, Kinder Conservative, The Show, Gregory B. Sadler, and Cush Classics. Please be sure to check out the show notes for links to all of these wonderful friends of the show, and to the featured sponsor today, Black Catholic Messenger, and also to all the other wonderful and generous sponsors of Folk Phenomenology. Let me do a quick shout out to Conversation on Tap. My friend Jose and my new friend Joel there run that podcast. I've been a guest twice now. One was in a two-part because I talk a lot. And most recently was an episode on critical race theory, which you'll hear more about at Folk Phenomenology in a few episodes. But that I got to go into some depth with them on the matter, and they've been very generous to feature that, put out some cool media related to it, and they've even run, I believe, a commercial for Folk Phenomenology on one of their previous issues. So thanks to our friends at Conversation on Tap. If you would like to support Folk Phenomenology, please share this episode and subscribe to the show on your favorite app or platform. And be sure to follow us on social media and interact with us there as much as you can. You can also leave a tip in the tip jar, which I'll be collecting and saving to get us started for season 2. Next week's episode 10, features an interview I did with Rebecca Christian. The interview is premised on a trip that she took with her family to Ghana. In fact, she approached me with this story as something of a substitute to the conversation that I had in mind. But woven into that story is, well, her own biographical story, and also her vocation as a black doula, as a mother of mothers, as she calls it. It was a powerful interview, as many of these interviews have been, not only for the impact of the story of going to Ghana, the story of being a black doula in America, but really because of its combined impact. It gathered from both sides of that story into a really powerful presentation of a number of things, including radical black politics, reminiscent really of the episode on abolition with Sophia Elena Gurule, and of course also echoing many of the other episodes. For instance, the notes about James Cone in the Liberation Theology episode with Vanessa Zuleta Goldberg. I hope that now, as we move into the very middle of this season, that there is something like a shape taking form, like there's something of a sense or a particular impression that's being left across these interviews. And my hope is that it tells us something, not only about the individual episodes, but about something that they're speaking to as a whole, in a kind of unison, in harmony, with dissonance, to be sure. And we'll hear more on the dissonance soon when the debates start. But I'd like there to be something of a choral effect, and to imagine every voice kind of singing in one voice if you can. Folk Phenomenology is written, hosted, recorded, and produced by me, Sam Rocha. To find out more about me and my work, you can go to www.samrocha.com. Well, it sounds like I have some work to do on my squat technique and in general on my strength and exercise training. But that too is a way to love the world. So go out and love the world. Dilexit Mundum. We'll see you next week.
What is interesting to me, really interesting, and I can't define it, is because it's interesting. I can't say exactly what it is, but it's the most interesting, I don't know the word, concept, idea.
My job is to somehow make them curious enough or persuade them by hook or crook to get more aware of themselves and where they came from and what they are into and what is already there, and just to bring it out. This is what compels me to compel them, and I will do it by whatever means necessary.
Love is where you find it. It's where you find it. It's where you find it. Love is where you find it. And you don't know where it will carry you. And it is a terrifying thing. Love, it is the only human possibility, but it's terrifying. And
Through the eyes of our ears, we see the beauty of hope. We see the beauty of pain. We see the beauty